Okay, just a quick overview of the setup here. It's a homemade Cyclone. I made it probably about 8 years ago. It's got a 30 litre drum on the bottom, which is okay, you know, you can kind of do a good day's woodworking with that and have to empty it. I used to have two, about, I think they're 1200 watt, those cheap sort of shop vac things, but they actually, you could get HEPA cartridge filters for them, and I had a couple of those in here probably before I put the drawers in and stuff. So you know, they took up a bit more room, but anyway, the brushes went on the motor on one of them. Despite replacing it, I think the commutator had already knackered up, so I kind of decided to ditch those, and I got this thing, which is it's like a twin motor Numatic. You know, people are probably familiar with the little Henrys that they make, and they do a range of industrial machines, of which this is one. So this is rated at 2000 watts, so it's got two motors in there, and I was kind of thinking, well, more or less it might do what the two cheaper things did before, because these ain't cheap. But what I'm finding is that as I got it set up at the moment, using the bag as a filter, because although it's got filters in it, they're not great. It's like a two-stage cloth filter type deal. I can get that and show you. Yeah, so you've got like an inner one, an outer filter, but more importantly, these bags, I think they're branded sort of HEPA Flow or whatever. They're not HEPA filters, but they're pretty good. They're several, like 5 layers of like, you know, sort of thing. You make a dust mask out of non-woven polypropylene. They are pretty good, and they do filter pretty well. So well, in fact, what happens is once you get a layer of dust in there, the whole thing during use gets sucked up to the top of the drum, and you haven't really got a lot of surface area to work with. So my plan is, because you can use these machines in another way, where you use the side inlet and you use a bag with the top cut off to kind of line this. The only problem with that is you're going to have the same thing, is that the bag is going to be sucked up to the top and scrunch up. So I am going to use something which I've kind of cobbled together to go inside of the bag to hold it like that, and hopefully I'll show you how it might work. These are the bags that you get with it, and the instructions say you can kind of cut them off along here and use it to line the drum. I would recommend, because I've looked at these plies and they're not the same, it's not like a symmetrical stack. So if you're gonna do it, they don't say it, but if you're gonna do it, I would say turn the bag inside out as well before you use it to line the drum, because I think you'll probably find, if it's made in any sort of sensible way, you'll have like the coarser layers first to catch the big bits of dust, and then there'll be, you know, they'll progressively get through to a finer and finer mesh. But that's just my thoughts on that. What I'm going to do is cut this and then see how well this fits in it, and hopefully it will make almost like a pleated filter type deal there, but we'll see. So here's a bag with the top cut off, and it turned inside out, just for what it's worth, because you're actually using it the other way around, the airflow. Instead of coming from the inside of the bag, it's coming from the outside in, so it makes sense to turn it inside out. Looking at the 4 plies, they do look slightly different, so I don't know how much difference that actually makes, but it's probably a good idea to do it anyway. It looks like there's plenty of room, and if you imagine what's going to happen is that this is going to sort of suck in around this frame, and on the outside here is where any dust that makes it through the Cyclone, which is usually, in my experience, the fine, really fine particles, will actually hit there. And underneath I've got another bit which I'll just get, which is kind of like that. That will sit in the bottom of the drum, and that'll sit on top, and hopefully that'll give a maximum, as maximum as possible, surface area. it won't all be able to just scrunch up at the top of the barrel as it seems to be doing at the moment. But yeah, I'm going to give it a go, and what I am going to do before I put all this together is I've got some of this, it's like a draft-proof strip. I'm just going to stick it around the edges of the ply, because I get the feeling that after a certain number of hours with this being turned on and off a few times, this is going to start the edge of the ply, even though I varnished it and rounded it over and all the rest of it, will just start wearing a hole through the bag, which is obviously going to ruin the whole thing. Okay, that's that done. Yeah, so part of the reasoning behind all this in the first place is that I needed to come out with a sort of like compact solution, but also move a lot of air. So as you can see, this chap's got 2 motors, and you can see, even though you can get a HEPA module for this, which kind of sits in between the top and the can there. You know, certainly visually there's not any real build up of dust, but of course it's really fine stuff that you can't even see, which causes you the most health problems. So don't know, it's probably something to think about in future. That's the 2-layer filter, and this is the current setup. It sucks in through that one, but as I say, all this just gets dragged up to the top when it's in use, and you get very little effective surface area, so you lose out pretty quickly. I'm pretty happy with the way that's kind of turned out there. I'm going to put the filters back on. And put it back together and hook it up, see how it goes. Okay, got it back together. What I tend, just as an aside, what I tend to do is they do come with these little diffuser caps to go on the outlet there. Don't really see a great deal of point in that. It does restrict the flow again just a little bit more. It's just, you know, it's an incremental thing, but I just leave it off. Yeah, you may find it slightly louder with it off, but these are not loud units really compared to the 2 cheaper versions that I used to have. You know, they were really noisy. You can see this will be the inlet now, and you can see the bag in there, which is kind of like stretched over the frame so it can't collapse. I have turned it on when I first tried it, and you got it must have been an initial surge, which was an awful lot more than the airflow that would begin with, because it pulled out a load of dust that was stuck in various bits of pipe work, probably connected up to the table saw and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, on first impressions it does seem to be working a lot better. You know, that said, just changing the bag and on the original setup would have probably yielded a similar sort of result. I'm just hoping that this will be better off in the long term. And yeah, I mean, this is, you can see not much makes it through. This is like, you know, this is the only bag I've ever had in it. I've had it about 6 months, and this, but what is in there is yeah, just the very finest dust. Anyway, I'll just turn this on, and you can see it going. If you can hear me, that is it running, and certainly kind of anecdotally, it has got much better flow. But as I say, we'll have to see how it goes over time as the bag loads up with a bit of dust. Switch it off. But yeah, something to note really when you are running the Cyclone, even though this is only like a homemade one, but it seems to actually, as far as filtration goes, it does catch 99.9%. Is that to run the Cyclone itself takes a certain amount of power, so I don't know if it takes sort of half the power available to it, but certainly I found that when I had one cheaper dust extraction unit, and I just had that hooked up without a Cyclone to this sort of 2-inch ducting system, and I was trying to use the thicknesser would be fine. As soon as I put the Cyclone on with one, it it reduced the flow just running the Cyclone down to a point where you couldn't really use this thicknesser, so hence I had to then buy another unit and have them teed in together, and that sort of then brought it up to maybe round about just about what it was like with one, or maybe a bit better than with one unit before the Cyclone. But of course you can just then fill up the drum for the chippings and dust and not have to be constantly paying out to change bags all the time. Yeah, so I mean I suppose that's the drawback of running a Cyclone anyway, is that you do sacrifice a certain amount of flow to run it, but I think certainly from my point of view it's definitely worthwhile.